I'm Gabriel, and this is The Rare Mind. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the INFJ myth, not just the gentle visionary, but the shadow Jung said we can't ignore. Stay with me until the end, because I'll give you practical ways to turn that hidden darkness into authentic power. The world has always been eager to crown INFJs as untouchable saints, soft-spoken prophets of harmony. The archetype is flattering gentle visionaries, immune to pettiness, walking embodiments of compassion. Yet this myth is not a gift, it is a prison. It blinds both the INFJ and those around them to the deeper currents that move through the psyche. To wear only the costume of light is to deny the half of life that resists illumination. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, the region of the soul where what is rejected, shamed, or feared is stored. For INFJs, the pressure to embody goodness means their shadow grows heavy with anger, envy, and aggression unacknowledged. I remember years where I tried to smile through every fracture as if courtesy could dissolve the storm I carried. It never worked. The more I suppressed, the more the shadow whispered. There is nothing weak about admitting contradiction. In fact, the demand to appear endlessly good is cruel. To expect an INFJ to radiate empathy without end is to treat them as a myth rather than a person. Sometimes it just hurts. The mask of purity fractures under the weight of rage denied, and when it cracks, both the INFJ and their relationships tremble. The false image, then, is not harmless. It creates inner tension, a quiet war between the soul's desire for truth and the ego's fear of rejection. We can live for years split between saint and shadow, never daring to unite them. But the cost is high. Resentment accumulates, and the very empathy that once healed becomes sharpened into subtle forms of control or silent punishment. The first step is brutal honesty. Every INFJ carries contradictions. Every heart holds darkness. To accept this is not to fall from purity, it is to rise into wholeness. The practice is simple. Journal without censorship for 10 minutes, letting the unacceptable thoughts breathe on the page. What surfaces may disturb you, but it will also free you. To name the shadow is to disarm it. In the end, Jung's harsh truth is mercy in disguise. The INFJ is not an angel fallen into shadow, but a human called to integrate. Wholeness is not perfection. It is the embrace of opposites, the courage to say, I am not only light, and therefore, I am real. Jung described the shadow as the hidden, repressed, and unfavorable aspects of the self, what we deny but cannot escape. For INFJs, the shadow often carries anger, competitiveness, even a thirst for control. When these instincts are ignored, they don't vanish, they leak. They return in dreams, in moments of disproportionate resentment, in the cold withdrawal that follows prolonged silence. This is why the INFJ, who appears endlessly composed, can surprise even themselves when fury erupts. I have felt this eruption in my own chest heat rising like a wave after months of politeness. I had told myself I was above anger, but no one is. To deny it is to become its hostage. Unlike INTJs, who often integrate their shadow through bluntness, INFJs tend to polish their outer mask so carefully that their inner volcano remains unseen until it burns through. This is not virtue, it is avoidance. The INFJ's gentleness, when weaponized against their own instincts, becomes self-betrayal. Sometimes, the refusal to acknowledge the dark side is more destructive than the dark side itself. But what happens when the shadow is given voice? The INFJ begins to recognize hidden aggressiveness not as an alien force, but as energy that can be channeled. Anger becomes a boundary. Frustration becomes fuel for clarity. Even resentment, when acknowledged, reveals where self-sacrifice has crossed into self-erasure. To meet the shadow is to reclaim these powers. The practice is uncomfortable but essential. When anger rises, pause before suppressing it. Ask, what value of mine is being violated? Write the answer, speak it if possible, even whisper it in a room alone. The goal is not eruption but recognition. When I describe that quiet rage INFJs feel when boundaries are crossed but stay silent for too long, did it resonate with you? If you caught yourself nodding, hit the like now. That tells me it's worth bringing more of these raw, uncomfortable truths to the table. In the end, the INFJ's task is to stop fearing their shadow as a monster. It is simply the other half of their soul waiting to be included. Jung insisted that without this union, no real transformation is possible. The INFJ who embraces both light and dark does not lose compassion, they deepen it, for they know its cost. Without shadow, empathy remains shallow. With shadow, it becomes indestructible. The INFJ learns early that kindness disarms hostility. Politeness becomes a shield, softness a way to survive in a world that feels overwhelming. Yet behind this cultivated grace, another current runs. When niceness hardens into performance, it becomes a mask, not a gift. The problem is not empathy itself, but the way it is wielded to hide what lies beneath. The danger of the mask is subtle. It allows resentment to grow unchecked while the outer image remains serene. What cannot be spoken directly often seeps sideways as passive aggression, delayed replies, barbed silences, compliments laced with judgment. I have caught myself smiling while quietly punishing someone through withdrawal. It felt like control disguised as virtue. This is why INFJs are so often underestimated. People imagine the quiet demeanor means weakness until the mask slips. When it does, the contrast shocks. It reveals how long the INFJ has endured without speaking, how much frustration has been swallowed in the name of peace. But peace born of suppression is not peace at all. It is a ticking clock. INTJs, by contrast, are often blunt from the beginning. Their clarity spares them the poison of festering resentment. They may appear harsh, but their directness prevents the buildup of hidden debts in relationships. The INFJ's path is trickier, for our empathy seduces us into silence, even as our silence becomes a weapon. The practice here is to notice when niceness feels heavy, when words of agreement taste bitter in the mouth. In those moments ask, am I being kind or am I being safe? The difference is everything. Kindness frees. Safety without truth enslaves. One sentence must be said without disguise. INFJ's niceness can turn manipulative if left unconscious. To recognize this is not to despise oneself but to claim responsibility. When the mask is dropped, authenticity begins. And when authenticity begins, real connection becomes possible, connection that does not depend on performance but on truth, even when truth stings. Empathy is the INFJ's most celebrated gift. We feel what others feel, often before they speak it. This sensitivity creates bonds of trust, but it also carries temptation. To sense another's weakness is to hold power, and power, when unacknowledged, can slide into control. What begins as care can quietly morph into domination. This isn't just another feel-good profile of INFJs. Here we explore the masks, the manipulation, even the dangerous side of empathy, and then we ground it in Jung's path of integration. If you want to keep growing past the stereotypes, subscribe and stay close. There were moments in my life when I realized I was not simply comforting someone, I was guiding their decisions, nudging their emotions, even shaping their choices. My intention was to help, but beneath it was an unconscious pull to play savior. Sometimes it just hurts to admit this. The very empathy that nurtures can also become a hidden form of mastery. The savior role is seductive because it disguises itself as love, yet beneath the sacrifice lurks subtle pride. I know what you need better than you. In truth, this is not love but control. Jung warned that what we project onto others is often what we refuse to face within. The INFJ who cannot manage their own chaos seeks order by managing another's. INTJs, by contrast, control through logic, through overt structures and strategies. Their influence is visible, even debatable. The INFJ's influence is invisible, woven through emotions, silences, and Suggestions. That is why it can be more dangerous. It bypasses reason and enters the soul by way of trust. The practice here is ruthless honesty in relationships. Ask, am I listening to serve or am I listening to steer? If you find yourself pushing another toward the right path, step back. Offer clarity, not direction. Let others stumble, for stumbling is sacred. Empathy, when unchecked, imprisons both giver and receiver. But when purified of control, it becomes something higher, a mirror that reflects without distortion, a presence that frees rather than binds. To release the need to save is to finally love without chains. Love draws the INFJ into deep waters. Yet beneath their devotion runs an undercurrent of hidden resentment, born from giving too much and voicing too little. The INFJ often overextends, pouring energy into the other, believing sacrifice will secure intimacy. But when their needs go unmet, bitterness grows in secret, poisoning the very bond they hope to protect. The cycle is painful. First comes overgiving, quiet self-erasure, then sudden withdrawal days of silence, a cold detachment that shocks the partner who thought all was well. I have vanished into that silence myself, disappearing not because I stopped caring, but because I cared too much without boundaries. The absence became a test. Will you come after me? Will you prove your loyalty? These tests often remain unspoken. An INFJ may create scenarios where a partner's devotion is measured by subtle cues, watching for signs of betrayal in the smallest gesture. It is manipulation cloaked as depth. Sometimes, a sigh carries more accusation than words ever could. Who hasn't felt this unspoken weight in love? INTJs relate differently. Their style may appear colder, but it is clearer. When they disengage, it is usually declared directly. There is less guessing, fewer riddles to solve. The INFJ, however, weaves emotion into every corner of intimacy, which makes love profound but also perilous when shadowed by hidden demands. The practice here is to risk transparency before resentment festers. When you notice the urge to withdraw as punishment, pause and name the need aloud. Say, I feel overlooked and I want to be seen. This is harder than silence, but silence kills. The truth is that the INFJ's shadow in love is not their darkness alone, but the distortion of their greatest gift. Empathy becomes control. Devotion becomes a hidden contract. Yet when the shadow is faced, intimacy deepens. Love no longer depends on testing loyalty in secret, but on the courage to reveal desire without disguise. Real intimacy is not a riddle. It is the naked meeting of two imperfect souls. For most of their lives, INFJs appear serene. Their patience is legendary, their calm disarming. Yet beneath this still surface lies a reservoir of rage, seldom expressed but always present. When boundaries are crossed again and again, the anger builds in silence. It does not vanish. It waits. I want to hear from you. Which part of your own niceness do you feel sometimes hides a darker motive? Write it down in the comments. Even one honest sentence can be the first step in bringing the shadow into the light. I know the sound of my own silence when it has turned into fire. It is heavy, almost physical, pressing in my chest as if words could scorch the air. Then, after months of swallowing, I erupt. My voice sharpens, my tone cuts. People around me stare, stunned. They thought I was incapable of fury. They were wrong. The shock comes because the INFJ cultivates the image of harmlessness. Friends, partners, colleagues, everyone assumes that the quiet one will remain endlessly forgiving. But forgiveness without limit breeds violation. And when the explosion finally comes, it feels disproportionate, not because the anger is irrational, but because its history has been erased by silence. Who can see the years of quiet endured? INTJs differ here. Their anger is often direct, visible in the moment, sparing them the buildup of hidden resentment. Their bluntness is harsh but predictable. The INFJ's rage, on the other hand, is unpredictable, volcanic. It terrifies precisely because it is so rare. Sometimes it just hurts to realize how much we've held back. The practice is not to suppress nor to wait until eruption, but to honor anger as soon as it arises. Anger is a messenger, not a shame. When you feel the pulse of heat, ask, what boundary is being ignored? Then, state it not later, not silently, but now. Even a single sentence, calm but firm, can prevent years of unspoken wounds. The INFJ must learn, rage is not evil. It is the soul demanding respect. To release it consciously is not to destroy peace but to protect it. Jung once wrote that wholeness comes not from suppressing opposites, but from holding them together. For the INFJ, the hidden rage is not a flaw, it is the missing voice of their strength. To speak of INFJ manipulation feels almost like betrayal. How could the empath type, the supposed healer, be guilty of control? Yet denial serves no one. The shadow must be named. INFJs influence through emotion, weaving silence, tone, and timing into tools more persuasive than open argument. Their influence is rarely strategic in the conscious sense. It is instinctive, flowing from their gift of sensitivity. Silence becomes a weapon. Withdrawal becomes punishment. Even guilt can be summoned, not with overt accusation, but with a pause, a sigh, a subtle shift in expression. I have done this without meaning to, and worse, sometimes I meant to. I told myself it was protection, but underneath it was an attempt to steer. Unlike INTJs, who manipulate with blunt strategy plans, logic, direct argument, the INFJ cloaks influence and care. That is why it is difficult to confront. Few would accuse the quiet, gentle one of control. And yet, the partner who feels subtly cornered by guilt, the friend who feels responsible for our moods, knows this power all too well. The ethical danger is clear. When unconscious, emotional control corrodes trust. What once felt like intimacy becomes a cage. This is why Jung's warning about the shadow is so urgent. The traits we repress do not disappear, they act out in distorted ways. For the INFJ, denial of power only ensures it seeps out in manipulative form. The practice here is exposure. Catch yourself in the act. When silence is heavy, ask, am I retreating to heal or to punish? When guilt rises in your tone, admit it, even aloud if you dare. Such confessions dismantle the shadow's hold. They replace secrecy with choice. To be clear, the capacity to influence is not evil, it is potential. Manipulation, when faced, becomes authentic influence. The INFJ who owns their subtle power can use it openly, responsibly, even beautifully. Influence that is confessed becomes trust. Influence that is hidden becomes poison. The taboo, once spoken, transforms into strength. Jung believed that wholeness does not come from polishing the light, but from embracing the dark. The shadow is not an intruder, it is a buried part of the self, waiting for recognition. For INFJs, this truth is critical. To deny anger, control, or resentment is to live fractured, endlessly juggling masks of kindness while the unconscious leaks poison into silence and manipulation. I once believed that goodness meant refusal of shadow. I tried to starve it by ignoring it, but denial only fed it in secret. The more I clung to the image of purity, the more distorted my hidden life became. Jung's harsh reminder echoes still. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Sometimes, it just hurts to admit how much of our destiny is shaped by what we refuse to see. The individuation process, the path of uniting opposites, is the INFJ's calling. This does not mean becoming harsh or abandoning empathy. It means allowing empathy to coexist with anger, compassion, with power, patience with assertion. To accept contradiction is to breathe fully. Wholeness is not harmony without dissonance. It is the music of tension held together without breaking. INTJs, in their own way, often integrate shadow earlier. Their bluntness, though cutting, allows darkness to surface openly. For INFJs, the temptation to spiritualize, to soften everything, delays this confrontation. Yet the delay has a cost. relationships strained by silence, health weakened by stress, authenticity lost beneath performance. The practice is steady integration. When shame arises, ask, what part of me is trying to be seen here? Write it, speak it, allow it. In time, the fragments begin to align. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the teacher. The freedom that follows is profound. The INFJ who embraces shadow ceases to live divided. Compassion deepens, influence becomes honest, anger becomes boundary rather than explosion. Jung's call is still alive, to unite light and darkness, to accept the whole of the soul. Only then does authenticity stop trembling and stand firm. Theories remain abstract until they touch daily life. Shadow work is not mystical, it is discipline. For INFJs, whose shadows run deep in silence and self-erasure, practice is the path toward freedom. The first step is journaling. 10 minutes a day, uncensored, letting thoughts flow without judgment. Rage, envy, pettiness, what feels unacceptable must be given ink. Writing creates a mirror that does not lie. Anger, especially, demands attention. Too often the INFJ swallows it, then wonders why resentment corrodes love. The practice is simple. When anger flares, resist the urge to deny it. Instead, pause and name it. Even whisper, I am angry. I have done this in empty rooms, and the echo felt like liberation. Sometimes, a word spoken into silence is enough to break the spell of shame. If you don't want to miss the next videos where we go deeper into Jung's individuation process and specific shadow work practices, turn on the notifications. That way you'll get the tools right when they drop, not months later when the moment has already passed. Another crucial practice is saying no without apology. INFJs often believe refusal is cruelty, but in truth, it is respect. To decline without excuse is to honor both yourself and the other. At first it feels unnatural, as though rejection means betrayal. Yet every time I said no with honesty, the world did not collapse, it steadied. Perfection is the enemy of integration. The INFJ must allow themselves to be unfinished, inconsistent, human. When guilt whispers that you should have been kinder or wiser or calmer, remember, growth requires imperfection. Wholeness includes the fracture. In relationships, this integration bears fruit. Authentic bonds form when both light and shadow are allowed space. The INFJ who practices shadow work no longer manipulates unconsciously nor tests loyalty in secret. Instead, they bring both need and strength to the table, offering presence without disguise. The truth is simple but hard. Shadow work is not about becoming better, it is about becoming whole. And in wholeness, love is no longer brittle, it is grounded, durable, and real. To face the shadow is to recover power. For the INFJ, liberation begins the moment they stop pretending to be pure light. Strength is no longer bound to endless patience or saintly empathy, it emerges from the union of opposites. The dark side, once feared, becomes fuel. I remember the first time I admitted to myself, I want control. It was terrifying. Yet naming it stripped it of poison. What had once guided me in secret now became choice. That moment of honesty carried more freedom than years of forced kindness. Sometimes, the truth burns before it heals, but it heals. True empathy includes darkness. To comfort another's rage, I must know my own. To forgive betrayal, I must admit the temptation to betray. This does not corrupt empathy, it deepens it. Without shadow, compassion is fragile. With shadow, it endures storms. Manipulation, too, is transformed. When unconscious, it corrodes trust. When owned, it becomes influence, an ability to shape without deceit, to inspire without chains. The INFJ's subtle sensitivity, once shadowed, can be purified into guidance that is honest, direct, and free of hidden hooks. Jung's teaching is clear. The shadow is not the enemy but the key. To exile, it is to live half a life. To embrace it is to step into wholeness, where light and dark no longer battle but converse. Integration is not the end of struggle, but it is the end of secrecy. As we go into how INFJs sometimes turn empathy into subtle control, think of someone you know who struggles with boundaries. Sharing this video could give them a mirror they didn't know they needed, and you become the person who offers clarity, not just comfort. The rarest power is not perfection. It is wholeness. It is the INFJ who stands unmasked, who does not fear contradiction, who can say with steady voice, "I am light, I am darkness, and I am free."